called the most haunted town in America. It's still open for guests.
Really?
Yes.
All right, we're starting off the list with Inunaki Village. If you want a truly evil town, this is it. Inunaki is said to be this hidden village in a forest in Fukuoka Prefecture. There are only a small handful of residents in Inunaki, and they're not friendly. These are people who choose to go against the principles of Japanese culture. Anyone who's unfortunate enough to find themselves even just in the vicinity of Inunaki may be dragged in only to be met with the violent, sadistic people who live there. One story goes that in the early 70s, a couple's car broke down. They ventured further up the forest hoping to find help, but they came across a small empty town. It looked totally abandoned. Then out of one of the homes stepped this disheveled, crazy-eyed old man who told the couple they were in the village of Inunaki. Then he chopped them up with a sickle. So yes, Inunaki Village is an urban legend, but with every urban legend, there is a nugget of truth. And the legend of Inunaki Village really started with the old Inunaki Tunnel. This tunnel, built in 1949, has a history so dark that it's now completely sealed off. A number of violent crimes and deaths have happened at the tunnel, to the point where stories began to spread that there was this evil village beyond it. And even though it's all sealed off now, there are also plenty of stories of the place being very, very haunted.
Tucked away and forgotten by time, Ekigo Middlegate has quite the story to tell, straddling a line between a grim past and its very current eerie persona. A spot that once echoed with the despair of World War II concentration camps has now transformed into this intriguing, albeit slightly spooky, abandoned site. Located in a US Navy housing area campground in Zushi City, the middle gate to this campground is said to have been a Japanese ammunition depot, but also a place where prisoners of war were held and executed or worked to death. Guards of the middle gate have reported seeing legless Japanese soldiers in World War II era uniforms, as well as hearing the classic disembodied voices and footsteps. It's always the footsteps that get me. I don't like it. This history is certainly grim enough to make this place one that has countless tales of hauntings and ghostly visits, but the history of this area does not stop here. In fact, it is said that the area surrounding Aikigo also happens to be the resting place of around 50 yagura, or ancient burial tombs. The tombs were built into the sides of cliffs and date all the way back to the 16th and 17th centuries. Legend also has it that this area was a battlefield for groups of samurai in the 14th century, where many people lost their heads, alright? All in all, this makes a lot of sense why this place has countless terrifying stories surrounding it. A bunch of nearly headless nicks walking around. M'lady?
Next on the list we have Nichitsu, which is usually referred to as Nichitsu Ghost Town. And that's not just because it's completely abandoned either. Apparently you can still find some ghostly residents lingering around this place. Nichitsu was a tin mining town. The workers and their families had to live on site because it's a pretty good clip away from surrounding cities. At some time in the 80s though, everyone up and left, and it's not entirely known why. With most mining towns, there's always a possibility that the mines just dry up. Usually there's an economic factor, but whatever the reason was, the ghost town is said to be haunted. There's a doctor's office in the abandoned hospital that still has the remains of human organs. There's also a jar with a human brain that was there for a while, but someone stole that. Anyway, the place looks like it would be a pretty cool area to explore.
Let's take a jaunt into the eerie folds of Japan's past, right into the heart of Orianbuchi. Alright, I tried to look it up. It's not as easy to look up as you think it is, okay? So just politely let me know how to pronounce it in the comments if I got it wrong. Keyword being polite. This place isn't your average historical site. It's steeped in tales of sorrow and the supernatural. Here, the air is thick with the legend of courtesans whose lives took a tragic turn, leaving behind a legacy that's as somber as it is mysterious. The legends behind this place go back to the Warring States period. This was a period between the 15th and 16th century where there were almost constant civil wars and upheavals seen in Japan. During this time, this site had a gold mine. Of course, this meant that quite a few people were in the area because of this mine, and there were also courtesans who came here in order to give their services to the men working the mine. Unfortunately, in an attempt to keep the secret of the gold from getting out, it is said that those working the mines took the lives of the 55 courtesans in the area. Since this dark moment in history, there have been countless haunting tales from this area. It is said that the hauntings most often come at night, and people have expressed hearing mostly the screams and cries of the women who are said to haunt the area. So, are you up for a visit? This place sounds pretty horrifying. James, are you gonna go there?
Yeah, probably. Next on the list, we have Yokai Village. This small village in the Tokushima prefecture has a history full of tales of yokai. If you don't know what yokai are, they're basically the demons and spirits of Japanese folklore. This village once had a good number of residents, about 15,000, but the story goes that villagers started having encounters with what they could only describe as yokai, and at some point in the 50s, a ton of people just packed their bags and started leaving town because there were demons about, which is understandable. This village was the birthplace of a lot of yokai legends, including the Kanokai Jiji, which is a type of yokai resembling a short, old man who is constantly weeping. And when passersby try to comfort what looks like a small crying old man, it then latches onto them, and with the victim unable to break free from this small old man's grasp, because he's not an old man, he's a demon, the yokai then increases its weight until the poor person is just crushed to death. They've started embracing the spirits and demons said to reside there, and now hold yokai festivals and have put up tons of yokai statues. It looks like a really cool place.
Just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the tranquil sanctity of Nikko's Tashugo Shrine, there lies an altogether different realm. A ghostly echo of Americana right in the heart of Japan. Welcome to the Western Village, a theme park that once throbbed with the sounds of cowboy boots and saloon piano, inspired by the wild frontiers of classic westerns and the dystopian allure of Westworld. Imagine stepping into 1973, the year this very peculiar park sprang to life, a place where the Wild West met the Far East, brimming with gunslingers, saloons, and a replica of Mount Rushmore. But fast forward to 2007 and the tumbleweeds began to roll. The park closed its doors, leaving behind a tableau frozen in time, an eerie tableau that whispers tales of yesteryear to those who dare to visit. Today, the Western Village stands as a hauntingly beautiful paradox, a place where time seems to stand still amidst the decay. Urban explorers, those modern-day adventurers, flock here, drawn by the irresistible allure of its desolation and the uncanny presence of its robotic inhabitants.
And we're heading back to Tokushima Prefecture once again to discuss Nagoro. So this remote village has had a steadily declining population over the years. There were never a ton of residents, but more and more people started leaving to look for better employment opportunities. The old folks passed away. That's just what they do, and by 2019 the village that at one time had 300 plus people now only had about 27. So the place is basically a ghost town, but unlike other abandoned towns you'll come across, this one has become pretty well known for all the life-size dolls scattered throughout the streets and buildings. Tsukimi Ayano, a woman who had left the village when she was young and then came back about 20 years ago to care for her father, decided she wanted to make the place feel more lively, so she started creating all these dolls, and today there are over 350 dolls placed throughout the village. Definitely gives the place a strange vibe. On one hand, there's this tranquil beauty to it, just quiet and pleasant, but on the other hand, there is an underlying sadness about it, kind of like in I Am Legend, where Will Smith puts up a bunch of mannequins and he starts yelling at them because they won't respond to him. That is a sad scene.
What about the Osarizawa mine? Tucked away in the verdant depths of the Akita Prefecture lies this ghostly vestige of industrial ambition. Once a thriving hub of copper extraction, this mine's veins pulsed with the lifeblood of progress until the mid-20th century. Yet, all mines have their final days, and for Osarizawa, the echoes of activity have long since faded into an eerie silence. Now, imagine wandering through the abandoned town that once buzzed with the hopes and hard work of its inhabitants. Streets where laughter and chatter once filled the air are now corridors of quiet, bordered by the crumbling relics of homes and communal spaces. There's the desolate school, standing forlorn, its empty classrooms whispering tales of generations who learned and played within its walls, now surrendered to the relentless march of nature. But it's not just about what's gone, it's about what's left behind. The mine and its ghost town are shrouded in mystery that tugs at the curious and the brave. What stories are etched into the fading walls? What secrets do these silent shafts hold?
Next on the list is Nara Dreamland. Now, unfortunately, this place has now been demolished, but for a long time it sat completely abandoned, and urban explorers would share some rather creepy stories about the place, but I'll get to that in a minute. So Nara Dreamland was a theme park in Nara, the capital city of Nara Prefecture. It opened in 1961 and was around for years before finally closing in 2006. It couldn't afford to stay open because of low attendance. The place was huge, pretty much the size of a small village, and it just sat there out of use for like 10 years. There's something I find so especially eerie and sad about abandoned theme parks. I mean, these are places that are literally built to be filled with people. Everything is made to be an overload to the senses. Larger than life cartoony statues are all over the place. The signs are all vibrant and colorful. You're supposed to walk through a theme park hearing laughter and screaming and the sounds of large rides zipping along the tracks. So when these places are empty and worn down, left for nature to slowly creep in and reclaim them, it's just the polar opposite of what the place was originally intended for, and I think that just unsettles us. And it doesn't help that urban explorers would claim to hear strange sounds near the park's boats or see strange shadowy figures poking out of corners.
Dive with me into the eerie silence of Yodo Harbor, where whispers of the past mingle with the murmurs of rebuilding. A once thriving port bustling with life, suddenly silenced by nature's wrath in 2011. The Tohoku earthquake and tsunami didn't just shake the ground, they shook the very soul of this place, leaving behind a ghost town where echoes of lost lives linger in the air. Now, when you stroll through Yodo Harbor, you're walking a tightrope between two worlds, the tangible buzz of reconstruction and the shadowy quiet of areas frozen in time. These neglected corners, untouched and forsaken, aren't just empty. They're charged with the stories of what was. It's as if the town itself is caught in a haunting limbo, struggling to whisper its secrets to those who dare to listen. So, if you're drawn to places where history and mystery intertwine, where every stone and silent building might hold a hidden narrative, then Yodo Harbor beckons. It's a testament to the unpredictable nature of creation and destruction, and a haunting reminder that even in our absence, stories endure, waiting to be unearthed.
Starting off our list today, we have the Texas Killing Fields. As the name implies, people died there. At least 30, but possibly more. This stretch of land that covers 25 acres is located just outside of Texas City. It is vast, barren, vacant, and apparently the perfect place to hide a body. Since the 1930s, many young women have gone missing in the area surrounding the fields, and while some remain missing to this day, many of the women's bodies have been found, discarded, in said fields. The first discovery was made in 1984. A dog carried something its owner originally thought was a ball out of the field, but it turned out to be a human skull. And after that, the floodgates opened. Clyde Edwin Hendrick, John Robert King, Peter Zwarst, Kevin Edinson Smith, and William Lewis Reese were all arrested and imprisoned for separate killings, except for King and Zwarst, who had worked together, meaning that only a total of 4 killings have been solved to date. The killers of the remaining victims, as well as the remaining victims' identities, remain unsolved to this day. Next up, we've got Alton Bridge, also known as Goatman Bridge, located between the Texas cities of Denton and Copper canyon. The bridge was used from the 1930s all the way up to 2001 when it was closed for vehicle traffic. So yes, it's abandoned, but how has it earned itself a spot on our list today? Well, it's got a pretty dark past, which I will tell you about now. The legend goes that in August of 1938, a successful goat breeder who went by the name of Goatman, but whose real name was Oscar Washburn, hung a sign up on the bridge that read, "This way to the Goatman," which apparently severely pissed off a local radical hate group that I can't say the name of here on YouTube, but they wore white pointed hoods and they were terrible. Probably know who I'm talking about. Well, one of the members of that group took Washburn by force. They brought him to the Alton Bridge and ended his life. They threw him over the side of the bridge, but when they looked down to catch a glimpse of his body, he was nowhere to be found. Enraged, the group made their way to his home and killed his entire family. Since this alleged incident, many people have claimed on many separate occasions to have seen the ghost of Oscar Washburn leading his flock across the bridge in the middle of the night. Next up, we have the Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells, Texas, which is probably one of the most famously abandoned places in the state, according to the internet. Although it's no longer abandoned today, actually it's now a health spa. It was abandoned between the years of 1972 and 2019. The hotel opened its doors in 1929, welcoming people from all over who were attracted to this so-called crazy water with healing powers found in the town of Mineral Wells. Many spirits are said to haunt the hotel, including T.D. Baker, who died in his room of unknown causes after his mistress flung herself from a 7th floor window. Another apparition who calls the hotel home is a bellhop who was cut in half during an elevator accident back in the 1950s. If you already have a fear of elevators, I'm so sorry, that's super gross. Another is a young man who died of leukemia while staying at the hotel. Reports of red lipstick smears appearing out of nowhere, broken glass, windows opening and shutting on their own, along with legitimate ghost sightings, continue to fascinate visitors of the area and the hotel, both in its abandoned and reopened state. Next up, we have Stewart Mansion, located in Galveston Island, Texas. This area has a rough history. Before the grounds became the resting place of the Stewart Mansion, they had been the campsite of the Karankawa tribe, who were perhaps most well known for eating human flesh. The tribe was also killed on the land by John Lafitte's pirate colony in a gruesome battle. And if that's not bad enough, legend says that the father of the Stewart family went mad and killed his wife and sons, and then allegedly buried them all inside the walls of the mansion before taking his own life shortly thereafter. Many people who visit the now abandoned attraction claim to see the ghosts of the Karankawa peoples along with the ghosts of deceased pirates, as well as a voodoo priestess who many believe was a prisoner of the pirate colony. And of course, the ghosts of the Stewarts who are said to walk the halls regretfully and mournfully. Next up at our halfway point today, we have the USS Lexington, an Essex-class aircraft carrier, say that 5 times fast, which during the Second World War participated in almost every major operation in the Pacific Theater, which was kind of the Asia-Pacific Wars, and it spent a total of 21 months in combat. As you can imagine, the massive 872-foot vessel has seen a lot of action in its day, but on its final day at sea, the vessel was hit by 2 torpedoes in its hull and it began to sink. 216 crewmen were killed and 2,735 were evacuated. In true naval fashion, the captain, Felix Stump, was the last to disembark the vessel. He did survive, but died of cancer many years later. Thanks to fundraising efforts, the abandoned ship was eventually retrieved from the ocean floor and converted into a museum, which has been referred to as the most haunted in America. It's said that anyone who enters the ship will feel the presence of those who died on board. Next on our list, we have the Old Yorktown Memorial Hospital, which opened in 1951 and was abandoned in 1990, but eventually reopened many years later as a tourist attraction, meaning you can visit it if you want. While this is the case, many people believe that the hospital was never truly vacant, as even after its closure, it was home to the many ghosts that continue to roam its halls. In fact, the attraction is so haunted, it actually appeared numerous times on the reality television show Ghost Adventures. If you guys watch that, I don't know, let me know in the comments. I've never seen it. Perhaps the most famous story that outlines the horrors of the hospital would have to be the one detailing the incompetence of Dr. Leon Norwirski, who slit a patient's throat while performing a procedure on their neck. Whether or not this was an accident is highly debated. Was he incompetent or was he malicious? I don't know. I always like to think incompetence, but the ghost of the deceased patient is said to vengefully roam the halls of the former hospital. And the hospital is also home to a gaggle of ghost nuns who are super strict, and they punish those wearing unacceptable hospital clothing and sporting tattoos by pushing, scratching, or forcing them out of the building. Next up, we have Presidio Nuestra Senora de Loretta de Bahia, a fort whose name I will not be attempting to pronounce again, that was constructed in Texas by the Spanish Army in 1747. And it's the site of the Goliad event, which took place during the Texas Revolution and resulted in the deaths of somewhere between 425 to 445 people. Those who died were Texian army soldiers, prisoners of war to the Mexican army. The hundreds of men were killed with projectiles piled up and set on fire. It's a pretty dark past, so it probably comes as no surprise that the area is obviously super haunted, but what might shock you is the fact that it isn't said to be haunted by any of the men, but rather a woman who lost her lover during the gruesome event. She wanders the grounds of the fort, helplessly searching the graves for a name that can't be found. Many who visit the grounds have also reported hearing cannon fire, banging on the walls, and the strong smell of BLOOD near the fort chapel's courtyard. I'm sorry you guys, I can't say these words on here. Next up, we have a name I can definitely pronounce, Donkey Lady Bridge. We had Goatman and now we've got Donkey Lady. It's located 30 miles southwest of San Antonio, and the bridge is said to be the final resting place of a woman who was raised by donkeys after being abandoned by her parents. In 2006, the San Antonio Express released an article recounting her story. It appears as though while out one day, one of the woman's donkeys bit a man's son. The father was furious and later ambushed the woman and her donkey on the bridge, causing her to fall in the river and drowned. Many people have said that if you drive to the bridge today, turn off your car engine, you'll hear the cries of the woman and her donkey. If you have tried it, if you do try it, let me know. Starting off our top two, we have the Toya Ghost Town. At its peak in 1910, the town was home to a whopping 1,052 people. Not that much. But today, the number has dwindled down to just 57. This is possibly due to the 2004 tornado that devastated the town, leaving the majority of the homes and the volunteer fire department abandoned. While this might sound pretty basic, those who live in the town today tell of something pretty extraordinary. Dark, but extraordinary. Locals believe that the town is occupied by entities, young people with pitch black eyes that go around the town at night, terrorizing its residents, knocking on doors and staring through windows, instilling fear into whoever might meet their gaze. It has been said that this is the true reason for the town's near total abandonment back in the early 2000s, but of course, I want to know what you think. And finally, to finish off our list today, we have the former Williamson County Jail circa 1888. The jail was home to some of Texas's most notorious criminals, including Henry Lee Lucas, who claims to have taken the life of 35 people in the year 1982. It's a busy guy if he did it in just 1 year. The crime rate at the time was out of control, so much so that the jail became quickly overcrowded. So overcrowded, in fact, that it became incredibly easy for inmates to slip out of the prison undetected, only to continue their reign of terror on the Williamson County people. Luckily for the locals, the majority of escaped convicts were recaptured. Unlucky for the convicts, as the majority of them were sentenced to death by lethal injection, electric chair, and the old rope and tree. But you guys know by now, I can't say that word on here. The jail was abandoned in 1971, but it later reopened as county offices, and it has been told that the deceased inmates now haunt the building, throwing binders and books from shelves and lunches off of desks. It seems like they're still kind of holding a bit of a grudge against the members of state. If you're feeling a bit disappointed at the fact that no, it's technically no longer abandoned, it once was though, so that's why it's on this list, I will give you some solace in knowing that the building is actually open for public tours during the fall season, so do with that what you will.
Castleton. I have always wanted to go to a ghost town. I think it would be like really eerie, fun at the same time, and the town of West Castleton on Lake Bomoseen has long been abandoned. What once used to be a busy, bustling industrial town has been empty since the 1930s, and there are many who claim that the area is teeming with ghostly apparitions. There is one tale about two men who once took their boat out to visit a tavern in town but were never seen from again. The only remnants of the men was their empty rowboat found floating alone in Lake Bomoseen following day. Some say that on some nights when the moon is full to have seen an empty, semi-translucent rowboat silently making its way across the water towards the abandoned town on the other side of the lake. If you're liking the channel, guys, don't forget to comment and subscribe. It really helps us out more than you probably know. All right. On to number 9. At number 9, we have Montpelier Cemetery, more specifically the Black Agnes statue, sitting atop the grave of John Hubbard, a notorious crook in the late 1800s who swindled his way into gaining his aunt's inheritance, which was meant to go to the city. He received his aunt's estate to the frustration of the city leaders, but died of liver cancer just a few years later. This statue is pretty famous for being one of the most haunted items in the state of Vermont. And just looking at it doesn't really surprise me much. I don't really believe in curses myself. I've never been cursed, at least that I know of, and I've never successfully cursed anyone else, though I have tried on a number of occasions. But looking at a statue like this, I could see why people would feel a little uneasy around it, especially upon learning that the statue is meant to be the personification of death itself, the Greek god Thanatos. It is said that if you sit on the statue's lap, you'll be met with misfortune, and if you dare sit upon it on a full moon at midnight, you will die within a week. Next on the list, we have the Brattleboro Retreat Tower. This beautiful Gothic tower sits on the grounds of Brattleboro Retreat, which is a mental health facility that still operates today, but was originally built as an asylum in 1834. This particular tower was constructed between 1887 and 1894 by patients of the asylum, with doctors believing they would benefit from physical labor, and the tower still remains, now standing abandoned. That tower has a bit of a dark history, though. There were said to be multiple cases of patients having taken their lives from the top of the tower, and in the 1920s and 30s, there were multiple shootings surrounding the tower that finally led to its entrance being boarded up in 1938. Those who visit the structure today claim to feel an eerie presence, even reporting having seen ghostly apparitions plummeting from the top. If I ever find myself in the area, I'd love to check it out. Aside from the ghost stuff, it'd just be really cool to hang out by this Gothic tower in the middle of a forest. Glastonbury Mountain, located in Bennington County's Green Mountain National Forest, has been the breeding ground for all sorts of paranormal activity. If you decide to traverse the mountain, you just might happen across a Sasquatch or spot a UFO in the sky. There's even an Algonquin legend about a stone that devours people. And if all that isn't enough to pique your interest, the area is also said to be cursed. 5 hikers known to have gone missing in the area between 1945 to 1950. Only one body was ever found, and the cause of death was never determined. There have also been so many strange occurrences in the area. It's often referred to as the Bennington Triangle, like the Bermuda Triangle. See, you get it. Number 6, the Dutton House in Shelburne Museum. Shelburne Museum is a collection of various historical buildings, most of which have been moved to the property from other locations. And one of these structures is the Dutton House. The home was built by the Dutton family in Cavendish, Vermont in 1781. And 11 people are thought to have died in the home, and it was left abandoned for decades before being moved to the museum in 1950. Staff say they've seen some pretty strange things in there, like the sound of a little girl crying, which isn't a sight, that's something you hear, James. Anyway, but they've also seen ghostly faces in windows. Some visitors claim they've heard eerie whispers in the halls and felt an icy chill running down their spines. And there have been sightings of a transparent figure roaming the house at night. They say it's the ghost of the original owner who passed away. Some folks reckon he and his family are still lingering around. They're refusing to leave the home. Some staff are so creeped out by the place that they just refuse to go inside it entirely. Next, we have Green Mountain Inn. This inn is said to be haunted by one primary apparition, that being Boots Berry, located in Stowe. This beautiful inn, built back in 1833, pretty picturesque. Honestly, if I ever take a trip to Stowe, this is where I want to stay. But you may find yourself rooming with an extra guest. Boots Berry was said to have been born in the hotel, the son of 2 employees. As he grew up, he developed a drinking problem, though, and was eventually kicked out of the inn. Landed himself in a prison in New Orleans, but soon returned to Stowe, where he supposedly fell to his death off the roof of the Green Mountain Inn, where he apparently loved to tap dance. So some say on some nights they can hear the sounds of his tap dancing feet on the roof. Others claim to have actually seen a full-bodied apparition of Boots making his way down the corridors of the inn. Number 4, Norwich University. Some dark things are said to have happened in the walls of this prestigious institution, with its gorgeous campus nestled among the rolling hills, and has a reputation of being haunted. There's a boarded up dorm room where a long time ago, 2 students were said to have taken their lives. Students and staff have reported hearing strange noises and voices emanating from the supposedly empty room. Then you have Chaplain Hall, the former library where books were said to fly and float off the shelves. Nowadays, residents report seeing strange figures roaming the hallway. You also have 2 other areas of the school that are supposedly plagued by paranormal activity: Ranson and Hawkins Hall. Many students have reported waking up unable to move or breathe, feeling like something is sitting on their chest. Sleep paralysis, it can be pretty unsettling, but I doubt there's anything paranormal going on there, especially for stressed out university students, but hey, I guess you never really truly know. Next up, we have Marble Inn, located in Fairhaven, Vermont. This inn is said to have a few different spirits that reside within the building. It was built in 1867, and one of the previous owners apparently passed away in the tea room, and apparently he was pretty upset about it too, because now he, as well as a couple other ghosts, supposedly haunt the place. Many guests have reported waking up to see the figure of a man in a gray suit standing at the foot of their bed. There was also an instance where a repairman was working on the basement and suddenly spotted a woman standing behind him, but she just remained silent before walking into another room. Repairman was obviously pretty confused, but he followed the woman into the room. When he entered it, there was nobody there. Classic ghost story, just an empty, dark room. I wonder what the rest of this workday was like after that. How do you just go back to what you were doing after experiencing something like that? Like, if I saw a ghost, that'd just change everything for me. Oh, ghosts, I guess they just exist now. Well, that completely changes my entire outlook on life. What happens after death? What is reality? Am I just hallucinating things now? Am I someone who hallucinates? What is going on? Anyway, these pipes, they're not gonna fix themselves. Back to work. Number 2, the Bowman House, aka Laurel Hall, regarded as one of the most haunted places in Vermont. The first owner of the home, John Bowman, is buried in a mausoleum on the property, along with the rest of his family, each of whom died tragically. Locals swear they've seen shadowy figures moving about the rooms, and strange noises echo through the halls at night. Some say they hear the disembodied cry of a baby, which would really freak and irk me out, quite frankly. I can't stand babies crying in public as it is. They seem to show up everywhere I go for some reason. So last thing I need in my life is a wailing ghost baby now. Some people who visit the home even claim to have seen the ghostly figure of Mrs. Bowman standing at the top of the stairs. There are whispers of disembodied voices calling out in despair and ghostly stuff going on. Some folks claim they've even witnessed objects moving on their own. Basically, some people think it's haunted is what I'm getting at here. Number 1, we have Gold Brick Bridge, aka Emily's Bridge. Emily's Bridge in Vermont is infamous for its spooky reputation as a haunted hotspot. Not only is it said to be the most haunted place in the state of Vermont, but one of the most haunted bridges in the United States. This old covered bridge has a tale that'll send shivers down your spine. The story goes that Emily, a young lady, head over heels in love, planned to elope with her sweetheart at the bridge, but for some reason, the guy just totally ditched her. Devastated and heartbroken, Emily decided to end her own life. Ever since that fateful day, folks claim to have experienced some pretty creepy stuff around Emily's Bridge. Ghostly sightings, weird noises, the feeling of being watched, and mysterious footsteps. Those are just the tip of the iceberg, though. This lady gets physical. People find scratches on their cars. Some who dare to cross the bridge on foot have reported being grabbed or scratched themselves. And you know what? I gotta say, getting grabbed and scratched by a feisty female ghost, I don't hate the sound of that. Might have to book my ticket out there.
Ghost towns on this list have a tragic past. It is definitely Dawson. The mining town was bought by the Phelps Dodge Corporation back in 1906, and they're the ones who really built up the town, you know, putting in homes, facilities like hospitals, stores, a cinema, even a golf course. The city had 10 mines, and the place was booming with a population of 9,000 until disaster struck not once but twice. In 1913, Canyon Mine number 2 was shaken by an explosion in a neighboring town, and out of the 286 men who showed up to work that day, only 23 survived. Then, 10 years later, Canyon number 1 had a mine car that derailed into timbers, and the electric trolley cables sparked, igniting the coal dust. A majority of the 123 men that died that day were children of men from the previous disaster. Parts of the city's population moved after each explosion, and the demand for coal also declined quite quickly. By 1950, the last mine in Dawson was closed, and the whole area was sold and the structures demolished. The town was just kind of left to rot. What's especially creepy about it though is the 400 white crosses in Dawson Cemetery that symbolize the miners who died. Imagine not knowing it was an abandoned city and just going there and seeing that. Be like, huh? Coming in at number 9 is Ruby, Arizona. This mining town started operating in the year 1877, and it was quite rich in things like silver, gold, copper, lead, and zinc. Apparently the first US post office was in Ruby, which is kind of like a cute Easter egg of information. What's not cute though are the 3 double homicides that took place, aka the Ruby murders. What a plot twist, no one saw that coming. In Feb of 1920, the 2 owners of the Ruby Mercantile were shot and killed during a robbery. According to the locals and eyewitnesses, the perpetrators were Manuel Garcia and Ezekiel Lara, and it was quite easy to identify them since they were the only 2 unknown Mexicans seen in Ruby at the time. Then in August of the next year, the shop's new owners, the Pearsons, were shot, killed, and robbed by the same group, yet their 3 daughters were somehow spared. The largest manhunt in the Southwest was still underway for these people, and a year later in July they struck again. 2 men in the gang were identified and arrested, and as they were being transported in a police car, the prisoners managed to get free and kill both of the attending officers. Despite all that, the late 20s were actually the peak of prosperity for Ruby. In the 30s, the mine was the leading zinc and lead producer in the state, but by 1940 the mine was closed down. A year later, the whole city was abandoned, but it's been kept pretty well preserved, I must say. At number 8 we have Bodie, California. Located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, Bodie struck gold in 1859, literally, but the hype around the town started actually growing after the Standard Company took things over in 1876. Within 3 years, the population had risen to about 7,000 to 10,000 people, and there were like 2,000 buildings in the city. But by the end of the 1870s came with a savage winter which killed hundreds of people through disease and exposure. Explosions and accidents in the mine also added to the death toll. The potential of the city brought in gamblers, miners, and other corrupt businessmen, and because of that, there were around 65 saloons, gambling halls, brothels, opium dens, and more. Some of their breweries were open 24/7, which back then was insane. But for that reason, the town's reputation started going down. Violence was at an all-time high. Someone would get killed or robbed every day, and street fights were a daily occurrence. By 1881, it was described by Reverend F.M. Warrington as a sea of sin lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. Sounds like the Las Vegas of that time. By 1912, the city started declining as mining profits decreased as well. Within a few years, the newspaper, railway, and last mine had all closed down, and by 1915, it was a ghost town, and it was actually named a National Historic Landmark in 1961. Filling on number 7 slot is Mystic, South Dakota, and honestly, I low-key just picked this one because of its name and that it reminded me of Mystic Falls from the Vampire Diaries. So Mystic is one of the many ghost towns located in the Black Hills mountain range, and Native Americans have quite an extended history with the area. It was actually called Sitting Bull before it was called Mystic. The city wasn't even really a city. It started off as a creekside camp in 1876 and somehow survived a really long time. Mystic's post office was built by 1885, 4 years later it had a railway line, and a second one by 1906. The town started importing coal into the hills and exporting gold out of them. And the journey definitely wasn't easy. A bunch of floods happened, destroying a lot of their bridges and railway lines. The Great Depression screwed them royally. Their sawmill burned down, but they just kept bouncing back, and we like that never give up energy. I don't have it, but I like it. By the end of the Second World War, everything was going to shit, and the mill was too expensive to operate, and then people stopped traveling there. The sawmill was closed, and so was everything else, and finally the whole population was just gone. on. Now at number 6 is Rialto, Nevada. Located right near the eastern part of the Death Valley National Park, this town got its start in 1905 as multiple mining camps just sprung up out of nowhere. It was the gold rush, so people were migrating to Rialto left, right, and center. The city had a lot to offer. It had resident hotels, an opera house and symphony, a hospital, a stock exchange, but the most appealing of all, its infamous red light district. Girls from San Francisco would get employed by the shops there, which was kind of like a delicacy, if you will. At its peak, the town had about 3,500 to 5,000 people, but it went down as quickly as it went up. The earthquake of 1906 and financial panic of the next year made money scarce and the mine stock value started crashing. They started closing down, which meant miners were also moving out of the town, and by 1920 the place was a ghost town. Coming in at number 5 is Kalapana, Hawaii. So this town is part of the Puna district of Hawaii, and fun fact, it was home to the infamous Star of the Sea painted church. Hawaii is such a volcanic cesspool, it literally has 15 out of the 129 that are part of the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount chain. In 1990, lava from the vent of Kilauea destroyed most of the town and its houses. Over 100 houses were buried in the lava flow, as well as Kalapana Gardens. The church was moved so as to not perish as well. The flow was so bad that even 2 neighboring towns were destroyed and a new coastline was formed under the 50 feet of lava flow. By 2010, there was literally only 35 houses left, and now the town is closed because of new destructive lava vents. It just don't stop, do it. At number 4 is Virginia City, Montana. So this city was founded in 1863 and was initially called Varina after the only First Lady of the Confederate States, Varina Howell Davis, but the judge objected to that and called it Virginia City instead. It took a matter of weeks for the town to start booming, people coming from all over for the gold rush. But this particular region had no justice system or law enforcement, yet it had a lot of wealth. And what happens when a place has no rules and a lot of money? A lot of shit. Criminal activity was at an all-time high. Road agents were killing and robbing people on the roads everywhere. They killed more than 100 people in a year. At its peak, it had 10,000 people, but of course when the gold ran out, so did the appeal of the city. By the 1940s, Virginia City had become a ghost town and was bought by Charles and Sue Bovee, who started maintaining the ruins, and by the 50s it was good for tourism. Fun fact, the frontier woman Calamity Jane lived there as well. Woohoo! Filling at number 3 slot is Shaniko, Oregon. Now plot twist, unlike nearly every single town on this list, Shaniko wasn't a mining town. It was for ranchers and was once called the wool capital of the world. People started making camps wherever they could find water, and it was actually initially called Cross Hollow and started properly booming at the start of the 20th century. The town was used as a transportation hub and was a center of sheep, wool, wheat, and cattle production. Their sales were like 3 and 4 million annually just for wool, which is incredible. At the start of the 1900s, there were 2 fires in the business district that ruined any extra hype about the city, and that's what jump-started it into decline. The place had been a ghost town since the 50s, but all the buildings are still there. The hotel, Sage Museum, Shaniko School, the ice cream shop Goldie's, and more. Now at number 2 is Kenot, Alaska. So this was more of an abandoned mining camp than it was a huge city, but it was still kinda like a little town. Located next to Kennecock Glacier, a duo of prospectors traveled to the area in 1900 and found a bunch of malachite. The area had copper ores as well, and by the next year the Alaska Copper Company took root, and by 1905 things were going really well. There was a steamship line, a railway, a school, a hospital, tennis courts, and a bunch of mines. Between 1911 and 1938, Kennecott produced $200 million worth of iron ore. That is ridiculous. For a remote little town where the nearest bit of civilization is 60 miles away, that is a lot of money. By the end of the 30s, the place was deserted since mining profits had gone down, and honestly it was too far away from everything, and it just wasn't the vibe anymore. The population was 3, and those people served as the watchmen of Kennecott. And finally, at number 1 is Garnet, Montana. I was so pissed. I try not to repeat any states in this video and have it all be from different states, but alas, Montana is on here twice. Damn you America and your 50 states. The prospectors found the semi-precious red gems there and gold, which is where the city got its name from. The place was founded in the 1890s as a major commercial and residential area for mining and had around 1,000 people living there by 1898. It had 2 barbershops, 13 saloons, a school, 4 hotels, a doctor's office. It wasn't really that bad to live in at all. The city became abandoned after the gold ran out, but they would have left anyway since a huge fire broke out in 1912 and destroyed half the city. That part was never rebuilt again, which is super eerie. Just imagine burnt ruins for half the town and just historical old buildings on the other side. There has to be some symbolism in that, I'm sure of it. Garnet is now on the National Register of Historic Places, and you can visit visit it, just don't move there. And
If I say any of these names wrong, I suck at pronunciation. We've been through this. Located in Alaska, this city was once filled with millions of dollars worth of copper ore. So when copper ore was first discovered on the land, workers set out to create a mine and track system. However, during this construction, tons of individuals lost their lives. Then when the mine was opened, tons of miners also lost their lives. Miner 49er. Sorry, I just thought of that. It's from Scooby-Doo. Miner 49er. Man. This is when the haunting started. People in the mines reported hearing cries for help from the dead miners, and their tools would mysteriously vanish into thin air. Another creepy thing that would happen is tombstones would just suddenly disappear. Apparently, travelers would see tombstones while passing through, and on their way back, the tombstones would be completely gone, as if someone just pick them up and move them, which is physically impossible. The city then got a haunted reputation, which scared out most of the residents. In our 9th spot, we have Mystic, South Dakota. This city first started off as a small creekside camp in 1876. Then over the years, the place began to expand. In 1885, it had a post office. By 1889, it had a rail line. And around 1906, it had a whole import and export system going on. But sadly, the town was hit by a bunch of floods that destroyed their bridges and rail lines. Then the town's sawmill burned down. But no matter what tragedy hit them, they kept rebuilding and recovering, and then they kept getting destroyed. It was just like a perpetual cycle. And then it was the end of the World War II, and the town didn't have enough resources to keep them going, and so the residents fled. But now, legend goes that the town is cursed, and that's why so many bad things happen there. In our 8th spot, we have Coleman. Back in the early 1900s, after the first diamond was found in the area, tons of people moved to this area in hopes of also discovering diamonds. The city then became a very bustling area. There was a casino, movie theater, and school. But sadly, by the 1950s, the diamond supply was depleted and a lot of people left the area and moved elsewhere to find more diamonds. Now the city is completely abandoned and most of the buildings are flooded with sand. And I'm not talking about just like a little bit of sand here. No, there's so much sand everywhere, it's tall enough to cover your knees, which makes chances to revive the town very unlikely. Moving on to number 7, we have North Brother Island. North Brother Island is a 20-acre island located in New York City's East River. The island once was home to Riverside Hospital, which was built to quarantine people with smallpox. Since the island was so isolated from others, they thought it would be perfect to house the sick there away from everyone. In fact, Typhoid Mary spent some time there herself. Mary Malone, otherwise known as Typhoid Mary, was a cook that worked for a bunch of different families. She got her name because she was an asymptomatic carrier of the typhoid germ. As a result, she infected 51 individuals and killed 3. She was then forced to live the rest of her life in isolation. Then in 1943, they used the hospital to house people with tuberculosis. But by the 60s, it was abandoned. Now the island stays that way and is off limits to the public. Coming in at number 6, we have Animas Forks. Animas Forks was once a popular mining town in Colorado. It was first inhabited in 1873, and 10 years later it was home to 450 residents. But in 1884, they were hit by a massive blizzard. The blizzard lasted 23 days and dumped 25 feet of snow on the town. In order to escape, the residents had to dig tunnels in the snow, and many people didn't want to return after that. By 1910, the last of the residents left the town after the last mine was closed. By the 1920s, it was considered a complete ghost town. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Ballestrino. This Italian town used to be known for its beautiful structures and buildings. Now they are sadly dilapidated and destroyed. During the 1860s, several earthquakes destroyed the buildings and scared off half of the residents. Then in 1953, the rest of the population was evacuated due to a series of earthquakes and landslides. Of course, because of this, the buildings are now cracked, they have collapsed walls, and they're too dangerous to enter. But oddly enough, one building and one building only still manages to remain in perfect condition, and that's the castle located at the top of a hill. It's quite odd how it's in great condition after all that. So it's thought that the castle is protected by some sort of magical force, but the rest of the town is too dangerous to visit. In our fourth spot, we have Bannack. Founded in 1862, Garnet Montana was once just a typical gold rush town. Now, it's full of paranormal activity and was even featured in an episode of Ghost Adventures. So back in the day, gold was discovered in Virginia City, which made people move to Bannack, which was nearby, in hopes of finding gold for themselves. But this caused a lot of problems. The road that connected the two towns was targeted. A lot of people were robbed or murdered along that route by a gang. Over 100 people died in only a couple of months. And in the end, the man behind all of this and the leader of the gang was in fact the town's sheriff, Henry Plummer. Dun dun dun! That's some Scooby-Doo stuff right there. Now it's said that Henry's ghost haunts the town. So unless you want to be greeted by a ghost of a corrupt sheriff, don't go there. He's not a friendly ghost. Coming in at number 3, we have Virginia City. So like I just mentioned, Virginia City was known as a gold mining town, and a lot of people were killed over this gold. In fact, because the city was so small, they didn't have enough law enforcement or even a justice system. So murders were kind of the norm there. Doesn't sound like a safe place to me. Well, now it's said that the souls of the people that were murdered haunt the area. People have seen ghostly apparitions by the hanging house and by the cemetery. They also have heard mysterious voices coming from within the opera house. And one visitor was even locked inside of a room by a spirit. Now, if you are really that intrigued to visit this haunted location, they do offer tours every so often. So there you go. But make sure you bring your holy water and Bible because there's a lot of ghosts there. In our second spot, we have Dawson, New Mexico. This city has a very tragic past. So in 1906, Dawson's mines were purchased by the Phelps Dodge Corporation. But on October 22nd, 1913, an explosion occurred in the mine and around 263 miners were killed. Then on February 8th, 1923, another explosion occurred. 123 miners were killed in this explosion. In 1950, that's when the mines were finally shut down. Now, to this day, one of the things that still remains in Dawson is a pile of white crosses. Those represent all the lives that were lost there. And of course, whenever a big tragedy occurs, the place is usually haunted right after. And this is true. Visitors have seen lights flickering on and off. The lights apparently look like the ones on a mining helmet, and they have heard whispers and voices or have even seen ghostly figures vanish right before their eyes. And in our number 1 spot, we have Oradour-sur-Glane. Oradour-sur-Glane was once a beautiful place in France, until it was terrorized on June 10th, 1944. On that day, the village was the scene of one of the worst massacres of French civilians during World War II. So since the town supported the French resistance, opposing soldiers stormed in and killed 642 residents. Men were taken to barns and shot with machine guns, whereas women were locked inside of a church and killed with explosives. It was very gruesome. On top of that, they burnt down most of the houses. The entire town was destroyed and there were very little survivors. All that's left are burnt down ruins, bricks, rubble, charred storefronts, and rusted cars and bicycles. It's quite a disturbing sight, especially knowing the horrors that
Room 206. This gives me Stephen King 1408 vibes, and I'm not sure that you're ready. Next time you visit Florida, make sure you read every customer review before you check into a hotel, because some of them might be full of ghosts. That might be a thing that you just might have to deal with. Room 206 at the Super on International Drive, apparently it's super haunted. Guests have reported the bed shaking in the middle of the night, probably terrible for your sleep, or freezing cold air even though the AC is turned off. And worst of all, guests have seen their bed look as though somebody was sleeping there moments before, even though it was perfectly made right before they checked in. Can ghosts squat? Is that legal? We've got a couple of spirit squatters in our room. Gotta move. Number 9, Disney on Ice. Many families love to visit Orlando at this time of year. The theme parks there are spectacular, especially Disney World. I went once when I was younger, but I don't recall ever seeing a real life Walt Disney. I don't know, maybe it has something to do with the fact that he died in 1966. Who knows? But never say never. One of Orlando's oldest tales is that Walt Disney had his body cryogenically frozen after his death. And right now, apparently it's being stored in a bunker underneath the theme park. I mean, that's a bit more creative than being cremated. I'll give him that. It's pretty Walt Disney of him just to freeze himself forever. A grad from the University of Central Florida Film School, Benjamin Lancaster, they actually made a film about this whole idea. It's called The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. That's a family classic, some would say. Number 8, Scarlet OHaras. You're gonna need 2 pieces of ID for this next one, alright? Perhaps the most haunted bar in Florida, located in St. Augustine, Scarlet OHaras is haunted by a past owner. Many believe that spirit likes to make itself known to guests. That's always fun. Try and go grab a pint and now you got a ghoul in front of you. That spirit is one of George Coley. Now George sadly bit the bullet one night when he was in his bathtub, so now we have a series of unexplainable events. Plates and glasses will sometimes move across the bar on their own, and the jukebox keeps playing Help Me Rhonda even when it's unplugged. So that's absolutely terrifying. If you want to check it out now, be warned, because it's a full-on tourist attraction at this point. But if you go, you can pose alongside the same bathtub that George Coley died in. Yeah, how lovely is that? Are we going to Disney World? Nah, even better, Scarlet OHaras. Yeah, you're gonna love it. Number 7, Stranahan House. You don't want to be stranded at the Stranahan House. It's gonna be bad news. Fort Lauderdale has a few haunted hidden gems, and the oldest house just happens to be the most haunted. What do you know? What odds are that? What odds are that? What are those odds? There we go. The house's OG owner was Frank Stranahan, and today, if you visit ye old stomping grounds, well, you might catch Frank in a photo or two. It's said that Frank still oversees the place, and he regularly shows up in guests' photos. So this ghost likes to photobomb. That's pretty amazing. I kind of like that. I suppose being trapped in the same house for all of eternity probably gets a little boring from time to time. Just to pop into a photo, throw some peace signs up, and then disappear back into the walls. Ivy Stranahan, Frank's late wife, she also has made an appearance or two. Nice, true love is haunting the same house forever. Guests have felt a cold hand on their shoulder, and her perfume still lingers in the hallway. Must have been some good strong stuff, nice. Now it's not all fun and games. Augustus Stranahan, aka Frank's father, well, his ghost likes to throw books. Really aggressive, so heads up for that, I guess, if you go. Cheers. Number 6, the Plaza Resort and Spa. Ah yes, kick back and relax with ghosts. It's just what you want. You're never alone, I guess. That's a plus side. The Plaza Resort and Spa sounds like a relaxing getaway until you start looking up footage of the actual resort. One's gonna get your attention for sure. Back in August 2013, security cameras captured late night footage of this shape-shifting ghost, some sort of spirit, some scary blob. It's bad news, really, in any regard. What happened was the original building was destroyed by fire in 1909, and current staff will testify that they've seen the ghosts of victims caught in that blaze. How they know? I have no idea, but apparently they do know. It's a lot of details for one ghost appearance. One of the most common sightings includes a woman whose spirit is known to mess with the elevators and make items in the kitchen disappear. Okay, really? That last one's for sure an employee stealing food. He's like, oh yeah, I don't know. I think a ghost ate that cheesecake, boss. I don't know, spooky stuff, spooky. Number 5, the Blue Anchor Pub. Another bar, another haunted bill to pay. Here we go, debit or credit. Heading over to Delray Beach, the Blue Anchor Pub was built in 1840s in London, but the wooden interior was sent to New York City and then later on sent to Florida in 1996. So yeah, these spirits must be confused. They go from Jack the Ripper to some dude wearing a Yankees hat talking to a TV. Trapped in the wooden interior is the ghost of one Bertha Starkey, who was sadly killed by her husband back in the 1840s. Now, you know Bertha is lurking about when you hear rattling pots in the kitchen, and sometimes if you're really unlucky, you'll hear wailing in the middle of the night. Nice, again, horrible sleep at this place. The Blue Anchor sounds like a really relaxing time, but every night at 10 o'clock, the current owners will blast a ship horn to scare away her spirit. I don't know, I feel like blaring a ship horn at 10 p.m. is more jarring than some pots and pans moving sometimes. You know what I mean? I'd rather hear the pots and pans than BANG in the middle of the night. No way. Number 4, the Builtmore Hotel. Another hotel to avoid at all costs. Awesome, we love these ones. First of all, do you actually like staying at a hotel? Some people love it. Some people find it super relaxing. I can't help but think about what went on in the bed before me. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, why does this part of the bed feel a little bit caved in? What's going on here? Every time I'm in a hotel, I have the worst dreams and I can't sleep at all. The Builtmore Hotel in the city of Coral Gables is also one of the most haunted hotels in Florida. You've probably heard of this at some point. It all started in 1926 during initial construction. The Builtmore witnessed a foul killing on the 13th floor. The 13th floor of all floors, my god. The Builtmore was also turned into a military hotel during World War II before ultimately being closed and then abandoned later in 1968. Now, the city renovated the hotel later on in the 80s, but it didn't take long for ghost stories to start to spread. It's horrible, horrible past, I mean, more than fair. Now, of course, the most activity is on the 13th floor, so if you do check this one out, really double down, go to the haunted floor, you know, don't just look outside and then book. Go in, stay a night. I can't believe some buildings don't have a 13th floor. Can you imagine that? Well, they do, but everyone pretends that they don't, you know what I mean? They're like, yeah, it's 12. I don't know, we'll see. Are you a 13th floor believer? Comment down below. Me personally, I don't think so, because it's the 14th or the 12th. Or the 13th, I don't know anymore. No one knows anymore. It goes 11, 12, 14. You're like, really? What's the 14s? We know what's going on here, come on. Number 3, Tampa Theater. If you're a fellow theater kid, you're also gonna love this one. Here we go. Tampa Theater opened up in 1926. The theater is now said, of course, to be haunted by a woman that was struck and killed by a carriage on the property. Imagine being hit by a carriage, it's so slow. This was actually before the theater was built, so her spirit has been there for a while. If you go to Tampa Theater today, you might catch a glimpse of that woman in a white gown walking across the mezzanine hallway. This time without carriages whipping through, hopefully, sans carriage. Imagine telling somebody in front of you to sit down during a show, then they just disappear. You're like, I think that was a ghost. I think that was probably a ghost. It says in the playbill, ghost, so maybe that was her. Tampa Theater, of course, has leaned into these claims. Now they offer Ghosts of Tampa Theater Tour, where guests can learn about its haunted history. I'd love to do this tour. I don't know, maybe I'll go to Florida. Who knows? I won't. I'm like, I'm probably not going to. Number 2, Key West Cemetery. A cemetery that's haunted. Get out of town. You don't say. The Beachside Cemetery was built in 1847. Now, it was built specifically for victims of a hurricane that occurred a year prior in 1846. That's terrible. Now, this cemetery is the final resting place for roughly 80,000 to 100,000 people. So yeah, I can only assume there's a ghost or two hanging out. That's extremely tragic. Walking through a graveyard at night is scary enough anytime, but Key West Cemetery is so specific that the entire time you're walking through, you feel connected in a way. Now, me personally, I'm all set. I don't want to feel connected to an 1846 tragedy. I'm all set. I'll go the long way around the cemetery, then I'll meet you on the other side, if anything. But if you're into this kind of thing, they also offer ghost tours, so knock yourself out. There you go. Apparently, it's too scary for children, so that's a plus. Lines will be a little shorter than usual. And finally, number 1, St. Augustine Lighthouse. A scary lighthouse? How? How is that possible? The St. Augustine Lighthouse is located, of course, in Florida and was built between 1871 and 1874. And it's considered Florida's first official lighthouse ever. Imagine that. Boom, let there be light. Hey, I made you a lighthouse. Enjoy, we're all good now. There have been several tragic events over the following years, seeing as it's the first lighthouse ever. Seen a lot of history. But even during initial construction, there were several freak accidents on site. Today, said spirits are still lurking about. Sightings of shadowy figures are common, but just one time, somebody saw a hand coming through the tower door. Yeah, a floaty hand, like from Idle Hands. How terrifying is that? Can you imagine just a Smash Bros hand just lurking near you? Several guests have reported furniture also moving around on its own, which is definitely a hazard. And one person even said that they had some of their arm hairs plucked off of them while they were in the basement. Probably that floaty weird hand just doink. Give me one of those. Another guest felt someone grab their ankle at one point while walking down a hallway, which actually caused them to trip and fall down, so something's going on. I don't know what this ghost hand wants, but it's pretty chaotic to me, it seems. I think the ghost hand wants you to click like if you like this video. I think that's what it wants, really.
If you enjoyed this video about abandoned ghost towns, then you have to check out this video right here. It's part 1 of this series. We introduce even more ghost towns. Click the video. Now what are you waiting for?